Can you
Thank you
speak
so
now?
much. Now you can hear me again.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, and I guess you can all see the slides.
Yeah,
So,
perfect. Well, let's make up for some lost time, shall we? Please to go to the next slide, Ben. So I do have to let everyone in on a slight secret. So my last name is complicated even for Dutch standards. The pronunciation is Scherpenhuizen. And I believe it was Winston Churchill who defined the Dutch language as a combination of English, French, German, and a throat disease. And I think that my last name actually hits it on the head. As Ben already said, I'm going to be joined by my good colleague Martin Payton, who will do the actual heavy lifting of this session with the actual demo. What I'd like to do first is start a bit off with actually challenging you to understand a bit more about what trade finance is, how the trade finance framework fits into that, and of course also how a trade finance project typically goes. So with that, I would like to go to the next slide, please, Ben. So trade finance is, of course, one of the most important processes, or well, let's say businesses within banks, financial institutions there as well. And this is always going about a lot of document and information intensive processing to facilitate international trade normally. So what we will going to be talking about today is the framework that our professional services team has developed based on their decades long experience in working in trade finance projects. So based on those projects, we have developed that framework. More on that later. Next slide, please, Ben. So I just picked out three, case studies, you might actually say, about the success that we've had implementing the trade finance framework over the course of the last couple of years. But keep in mind, we have a dozen other examples like these as well. This is, of course, one of the great examples we've got. This is one of the biggest banks in the world, global top 10 in Japan, who actually used the trade finance framework and the actual implementation by our professional services team to achieve a 500% efficiency improvement. And keep in mind that these sort of improvements don't only reflect a reduction of headcount. It is actually making sure that these organizations become more scalable, more able to, to service their customers better. So in this case, they went from 400 trades per day before they implemented this solution up to 1,000. And you can see the amounts of savings go to $2 billion over the course of the next couple of years. Next slide, please, Ben. On top of the example we just shared, let me share this US-based bank that is one of the leaders when it comes to international trade finance. They service more than 2 million trade transactions per year. And just to place that into the actual perspective, that actually represents over 30 million pages per year that they need to process to transact on those transactions as well. So what they have done is they've achieved between 80 and 85% of automatic extraction, and therefore indeed improving their operational efficiency twofold. Next slide, please, Ben. Then again, a bit closer to home, maybe Ben even is a customer at this bank. It could be. What the other thing is as trade finance is one of the most regulated financial executives in the world, there's also a lot of penalties, fines that will need to be paid. And I'm not talking about your typical traffic fine amount. No, I'm talking about millions, sometimes even billions of euros, dollars, pounds, any kind of currency you might have. So just reducing the amount of penalties that need to be paid could already be a great business case for implementing a end-to-end trade finance solution. So in this case, for this German bank, we actually achieved a a 50% reduction in the actual manual effort that's needed to transact all of these trade transactions. Next slide, please, Ben. So, as said, these are just three examples, but we've got dozens of others out there, and you might actually know more banks or other financial institutions in this specific realm that you say, well, hey, they might be benefiting from such a solution too. If you need to know more about some of the case studies we've done, if you want to talk about the projects themselves, feel free to reach out either to myself, but also to Martin or to Ben, who can always facilitate a quick conversation there. Next slide, please. At the same time, I'm of course following through with my slides on this side as well. But let's start to talk about the trade finance framework itself. So what is it? What is that magic that we bring to the table to achieve these sort of results? Next slide, please, Ben. So let's talk about the challenges, and I've already introduced some of them. In trade finance, you'll see that it is a lot of document handling. There's going to be a lot of manual effort required to transact on all of these. And I also said this is a heavy regulated financial process. And on top of that, it's also always evolving and changing. And as this is typically done in a very manual fashion, where people who are the most senior within a department know exactly how things should be done, and they then teach that more like a like a hidden art form, how to process that. So there is no managerial or maybe even executive insight into where these processes lead to. And with that, of course, all the controls and the insight that brings, it's not just on the actual improvement, but also from a regulatory perspective, you're going to be able to actually provide supervisory insight into that too. So what we actually do is we start to use everything within the Colfax Intelligent Automation platform, of course, with TotalAgility as its basis, to achieve the results we see here on the right-hand side. Next slide, please, Ben. So I also said that we have that distinction. So what is trade finance? What kind of projects have we done previously? And then actually the framework that we have now offered and are implementing worldwide. It is indeed a framework that can be tailored to any bank or financial institution that opts to start using it, and therefore, of course, reducing the actual implementation and ROI as well. Next slide, please. Then we'll need to talk about what the actual functionality is that we use here. So on the one hand, all of those documents that are involved in that trade finance transaction can be automatically processed. And of course, leveraging all of the capabilities that Colfax TotalAgility and the rest of the intelligent automation platform bring to the table. So the framework itself is pre-configured for these kind of document types, for these kind of rules, all of that as well. And what it also offers, it is not a big bang implementation style. You will actually have a very agile and very incremental way of implementing this. So leveraging and also delivering value almost from day one. Next slide, please. So let's then see how this solution is actually built up. And you might click through this until we get the whole picture, Ben, because this is nice and animated, of course. So let me talk about what we've got here. So as said, this is based on the entirety of the intelligent automation platform. So it is indeed leveraging TotalAgility, Colfax RPA, Colfax Communication Manager, maybe even SignDoc, the insight capabilities that we have. All of that is being leveraged by the trade finance framework. We then have all of the pre-configured assets within that already. So like all the trade document definitions, the rules, the exceptions, the dashboards, the process flows, all of that is there, but also some regulatory checks are being done there too. We can then indeed integrate this into an existing, infrastructure or landscape within a bank, within a financial institution, and then of course leveraging the capabilities that this brings to the table, so we can handle incoming trade documents from any channel of choice, and at the end also interface with any of the systems of records or the points of truth within that organization, and actually leverage the rest of the capabilities there as well. Next slide, please, Ben. So what will this actually mean for an organization that will be implementing this? Well, on the one hand, it's going to be an accelerator. It's going to be a catalyst for every trade finance automation initiative. And our professional services team will, of course, work with their teams along the way as well. Good to point out at the same time is that this is also something that we can be doing with partners as well. I know from personal experience that we have recently sold this to a Dutch bank through one of our partners too. Indeed, again, leveraging our professional services team. Next slide, please, Ben. So just a quick overview of what a trade finance process might look like from a almost a functional level. So indeed, all of the documents that are necessarily processed within trade finance would indeed go into TotalAgility. Those documents would then, of course, be identified, classified, checked against, is everything in good order? The data will be extracted. If needed, data validation will happen, and that could be manual validation or it could be data validation. And then we get to a point which is probably like the most important thing within trade finance. We need to do cross checks between the documents within that transaction, and that's exactly one of the things that we're going to be looking into later on too. Then, indeed, the actual business rules, and those business rules could, of course, be regulatory. They can be specific for a specific institution, you name it. And at the end, we will hand over all of the information, all of the checks to the trade finance system that the institute is using. Next slide, please. So, where do we then get manual effort in? From the people who are now working or maybe even manually reviewing all of these documents. Well, you'll see that in the process flow, and that's exactly what we want to be focusing on. We want to be focusing on improving efficiency. We are, as we typically don't want to aim for straight through. We want to improve efficiency. So what you'll see is that at these points at the top, that's where the trade finance people will come in, and that's the efficiency that we want to improve. Next slide, please. So I do want to make up for some lost time there, and what you'll see at the key capabilities that you'll have is indeed you'll have that automatic processing of these documents. You'll make sure that all of that consistency, not just within the document, but also cross document, will be in there. And you'll have the framework, the workflows, the case management, the regulatory checks, everything pre-built, and you can then indeed interface with any of the systems that you then want. And on top of that, we're going to be providing that insight that's typically lacking within trade finance departments who are still using a manual review there. So the results of that, next slide please, Ben, will indeed be, the benefits that we talked about when we talked about the three example banks there as well. But it's going to bring so much more to the table. It's going to be that efficiency improvement, the reduction of penalties and fines. It's going to make sure that a trade finance department will become much better in their day-to-day business. Next slide, please, Ben. So before I hand this over to Martin, I do want to also ask everyone, if you want to see any additional demos, please feel free to have a look at my YouTube channel. I don't have the QR code on screen right now, but I'll place it in the comments later on. I do want to hand it over to Martin now. Again, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A box on the right-hand side, and I'll be back after the demonstration. Martin, over to you.
Thanks.
Maybe we just stop here for a little moment. Let me just check if we have something in the Q&A box. One second.
That's a fair point.
I just need to find my Q&A box actually.
Ooh.
And there's one question actually, maybe we can clarify this. I just read it to you, Jasper. It is,
Mhm.
how was this framework defined? Was it with the functional knowledge derived from a greenfield implementation, or was it driven from the domain side?
Whew, that's actually more a question for Martin, as he's the person who is actually doing that. So yeah, Martin, is that something you want to take on?
Yeah, sure, Jasper. So basically, the framework was built around existing um, professional services engagements around the world. We looked at how these were implemented in the different countries, done by different people in different ways. And what we've done is we've come up with the best practices, and therefore this is where the framework was born. So that, as the slide showed, we can accelerate the um, the process and get it up and running quicker than you can if you're going to spend 2 or 3 years doing a custom process. So that's why we've built the framework, and it's obviously using a lot of the technologies that we have within our platform.
Great
All right.
question, by the way.
Thank you, Martin. Your screen is now live.
Okay, super. So, as Jesper said, we are built this on top of our TotalAgility platform. TotalAgility gives us work queues. This is one of our primary work queues, and here we can see just a list of different processes. But when we talk about trade finance, we have different methods that we need to get these documents in. So I'm just going to go to one of the upload screens. So here we can select one of our products. So we've got all sorts of import clean collections. We've got letters of credit, multi drafts. We've got outgoing collections, issues, outgoing collections, amendments, etc. So we cover all the different products that are normally within either export, import departments. Then what we're aiming to do is in this instance, I will give this a demo file name. Um, we can use a method to bring files directly into the system. So in this instance, what we're looking at here is a raw Swift message. The raw Swift message is something that gets transferred across the Swift network, and then we would read the Swift message and identify the headers, give us the dates, times, etc. We would obviously get the country as well, and then we would browse the documents. So this is a manual upload. Obviously, for most large-scale banks, what this is done is it's done through our web API. It's automated, so therefore there is no manual intervention in this part. It becomes just a straight through handshake between our system and whatever trade system the banks are using. And because we're using KTA, we have the full APIs available for creating jobs and for sending that data back to a system. So I'm going to go to our first screen, and our first screen that we've got to do is what we call document review. Now, what we've done here is we've looked at the different types of documents that are available within a trade. We have a list of the known document types, and you can see it's quite an extensive list. So here we're going all the way down to from the various different certificates to remittance letters to promissory notes to invoices to bills of lading, airway bills, fishery certificates, you name it, we've kind of got we've got that covered, and we use various methods to identify the documents. We're able to use the layout. We're able to use keywords, and what we do is we take a document pack, which will be a multi-page PDF in this instance. We split them up into individual pages, and then we rebuild it back together into the distinct document types. So therefore, we end up with a known list of documents. In this instance, we've got a packing list, a draft, an invoice, statement of origin, and a bill of lading. So document review is a very quick way of being able to identify your documents. From there, we would obviously complete that, and that will move on to our next step, which is it's an optional screen for some. Some do use it. We call this document checking. And primarily, what this is doing is this is reading the values from a remittance letter, or it's reading the values from the 46A within the Swift message, and it's identifying what documents are required. And from here, what we're able to do is to identify what the primary document is, so a bank cover letter. In this instance, it's a bill of exchange. And here we can also see what documents have been classified, and then we can verify the number of originals and copies. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say that we can determine an original copy, because that can be just down to a stamp. But what we do is we give the facility for somebody to be able to verify that this is correct and that the mandatory documents are all present. And obviously, if they're not, then it can be rejected at this stage before it goes down the next sets of the processing. And obviously here we can see which documents are required, which documents were mandatory, and I can see here that this one was missing because there's a 0 quantity against that one. So we would then either, in this instance, we would reject it, suspend it. We may even ask for documents to be resubmitted again. And this could also be done as a pre-check when you're obviously trying to check your trade packs to make sure you've got the right number of documents in. For example, on bills of lading, it might say 3 of 3, 3 originals, 3 copies. So here we would see number of bills of lading would be 6. And obviously there we would just put 3 and 3 because we would be able to check the bills of lading. By the way, we are using a demo set of documents. We're not showing real documents from a customer because we're obviously we've made these like a document that we would receive in the system. So we will move on to the next part, which is obviously once you've done your review, we then go into our validation. And in validation, what we're aiming to do is to extract the information as quickly as possible and in the best way. So here, what it will do is it will jump straight from so this document, it extracted the information correctly because all the fields are, there's no red exclamation marks. If we look at the draft, or the bill of exchange, depending on what you want, we have a validation rule here saying that the tenor code or the tenor descriptions or the maturity date must be filled in. So if it's not filled in, then the system stops at that point. But other than that, it's obviously extracted the other bits of information, and obviously we can search for bank information, for example, because we've got some lookups there as well. But before I just complete this, what we also can do is we can look at our other documents. So for example, we've got our invoice. There's a lot of blank space in here because obviously this is just a demo document where we would normally have bank information. But as we can see here, we've got everything simply like the invoice number. You can see it highlighted on the right hand side, the date, the amounts, and then we go down to the way we've built the system to identify both the beneficiaries or the applicants and the payees. And we use a lot of technology inside of KTA to enable us to get this, because in trade finance you're never going to see the same suppliers, so therefore we can't use a database of known suppliers for that lookup, which is different to when you're processing normal invoices where you would normally have a purchase order, etc. So we've got all of our different types of documents, and you can see here these are nice clean documents, so we're able to get quite good extraction on these. And where we haven't got our extraction is because the actual value is missing from the document, and this is kind of deliberate to make sure that we can actually stop on these documents. So we would, for example, if we were going for the draft here, we will be looking for the tenor days, and normally it would say 30 days after bill of lading or 30 days after shipment. So we would put that value in. Once we put that value into the system, it obviously jumps straight to the next field. In this instance, it would be the delivery agent. We would select a delivery agent, and then that would then mean that this document is completed, and we would move to the next step. The next step is again, it can be an optional step, which is we have a approver step after validation. So just bring that up. And this is quite a unique screen because it's one of the few screens where you're able to actually see, from an extraction point of view, all of the data that's being extracted on a particular document. So it's just loading. It's obviously with a screen share here, it just takes an extra couple of seconds. So what we can do, if I just minimize or make that a little bit smaller. So here we've got the bill of lading, the certificate of origin, etc. We've got all of our different document types, and then visually we can see all of the data that has been extracted from the document. We're able to see when we click on something, it's highlighting that section. This is also a screen that can be combined with a compliance screen where you can do white or blacklist checking, because you can then determine whether a supplier or a location or a shipping agent, for example, is in your banned list or in your red or black list. And again, that can be color coded here, and it will obviously then highlight that for you. And as you can see, if we go through, we can see that each of the documents are in the same situation where we're able to identify all the data that's been extracted from the document. And if there's multi-page, we will see all those pages there. Now, this is an optional field, and I'll come to optionals at the end, in that we can turn this on or off if required. And obviously, you can return this back to the validation queue if they've missed something. And this can also be used in a 2, 4, or 6, or 8 eye check, especially if you're wanting to put that sort of functionality into your system. From approval, we move to one of our most powerful features, which is the rules engine or the rules check. And here, what we're able to do is we're able to run a set of rules. I will bring the rules engine up in a second. What we're able to do here is we're able to bring up the document types. So here we've got the list of documents. We're also able to then check against what was in the original letter of credit. We are just in the process of updating this right-hand side screen to make it more friendly. But if we click on the left-hand side, we're actually showing the image. And what it's doing is it's checking the data against the Swift message, but it also, because of the grouping within here, we're able to then check this against all other documents in the pack. So this is where we've got the powerful rules of the cross-document checking. We've got the facility of being able to determine if it's if it's a triangular trade, for example, where the applicant and the shipper is going to a different country, we're able to determine all these sorts of things. We've got various different ways of manipulating the data inside of here, so we can remove the white space, we can trim it. We've got lots of functionality here, and also if we're doing things like maturity dates or trying to determine if the shipping date is outside of a period, again, that's a rule that we can do. So this rule had passed. In this instance, the port of loading. What had happened here is the port was correct. And we can see here, when we click on the document, the port of Hong Kong, and we were looking for the port of Hong Kong. And what happens is, if you make a change in any of these documents, it gets recorded. So we audit from start to finish every single process. And again, I'll show you that when we come to our reporting in a second. And when it hasn't worked, what you'll see here is that we have got conditions that have passed, and we obviously got things where the documents aren't in the pack, but where it's failed, we can have that in the second condition. So we were checking to see if the address is correct. Now, what's happened here is we've actually got a tolerance, or we use like a Levenstein, where we're able to determine if it's within a tolerance of 1, 2, 3, or 4 characters, for example, then it can pass or fail on that. In this instance, because we've missed so much of the address out, it's going to fail this condition. So we would be able to, for want of a better word, we could just select because we've got drag and drop even inside of here, we're able to do that, and there it will then check the values against the original value. We can save that, which will save this particular condition or this particular rule. It will check that rule against the rest of the values, and then it will come back and say what else is wrong that we need to fix. And then here we can see that the condition has changed because it's been marked up in yellow. Just bear with that. So yes, so stay in the edit or go back to the dashboard. So I just want to go back to the dashboard for a second. If we just cancel that. So we've got our rule check and we've also see what we've got is our document check, so we can visually see which documents are in and which documents are requiring us to do some work with. So we've got all of our different documents in. Basically, you're wanting to see everything is green. We've obviously got all the things like the properties, so we can bring other things into this view, and we can show more things down in this left-hand side. Now, one of the powerful functions that we actually created in here was that with this being a framework, we've made it all configurable from everything from the framework itself and all the different parts that you can switch on and off to the product configuration. So if you're wanting to set mandatory documents or different types of documents, but also when we go to our rules editor is a custom set of screens that we've built inside of our trade finance, which gives us a very, very powerful tool to enable us to do all sorts of checking. So, for example, if I go to a UCP rule, for example, of the commercial invoice or bill of lading is a better example, here you can see the complexity of the rules that we're able to build. Now, these rules can be built by the end customers. They don't require Kofax PS to do this. We've actually enabled it in such a way that we can, using the UI tool here, we can select everything from the extraction group to the document type to which fields we want to do. We've got all sorts of formatting functionality here, and it's as easy as creating static values or going back to documents, date checks. All of this means that you've got a way of being able to build your rules very quickly. Once your rule is built, and do you note to discard your change? Don't want to change that. We can manage those rule sets within our product. So, for example, if there's new rules that get added to the system, for example, when the updates, say the UCP rules or ISBP rules or SWIFT rules, then we're able to then see which rules we actually want to select. So, for example, we've got, if we go down, trade data's got some rules. So we can turn on or off each of the particular rules that we want to do. And that makes the rules very, very simple and easy to maintain. And also we've got the functionality that depending on the different products, we can have different rule sets running across the different products. And finally, just on my last set of screens is the, I'll just bring this across, wrong screen, this one here, which is our insight reporting. So, for example, you've got your normal operations dashboard. So this tells you how many documents are in the system, etc. But you've also got the important things like your actual documents themselves, where you can see the trends, but you've also got your classification and extraction. Now, in standard insight reporting CAFTA, this is per document, but what we've actually done is we've built some reports over the top of that, which allow us, for example, to look at it from a job point of view, where we're able to see, for example, all the transactions within one particular job. So we can look at the classification and we can see how good that data is. And we've got our extraction reports again, so we can actually see, for example, how a document is processed through down to individual fields, and if a value is being changed, then it's recorded as a change. So here we can see that this overall process was 97%. This is a very small system because it's only just being created for this demo, but as you can see, it's got very meaningful data. And then finally, we go down to processing time summaries, where we can actually identify from a time taken. If we look at the one that was done earlier today, we can see what the wait time was. We can see how much was actually done by the user and what the system processing time was. So we can actually track every single metric across the life of a product, and that gives you a very powerful way of being able to identify who your good bad suppliers are, and also who's obviously taken their time to do their processing and how accurate they are. So it's again built on our custom reports and built on the insight reports. So that pretty much covers my my screens, and obviously there's a lot to take in. There's a lot happens inside of our system. We've built it in such a way that all of these changes can be updated through configurations, through tick boxes For example, if I want to turn features on, I can go into the features and I can just turn those features on. If I want to go to product configuration, for example, if we've got, this is quite a complex screen, but it's really important for trade finance in that because different products have different requirements. It just takes a while to load. So if we're looking at maturity and payments, we can tell what business rules we want to use, where the cover letter comes from, which documents we might want to export, and we can tell what mandatory documents are required. So all of this is configurable, saved, and that means then that you can control at a very high level everything that you need to do to make a trade processing system, and all of this will then be exported to the backend system, and we can do that again through either APIs or, in this instance, what we've been using in this last engagement that I've just been doing is IBM MQs, where we're sending the data through an MQ series, which means then that we can keep, because they've got a totally different backend system, we can't get to that directly. We're using a middleware between the two systems, and that's working out really well. That's my demo done, Jasper.